So if you're buying goods for $5, you want to wholesale it for 10, and they will put it out for 20. And in order to get to that 5, you need to figure out whatever it is it takes to get it there. And if it doesn't work, then you likely won't have a successful item.
Hey Matt, how's it going?
It's going really well, Erin. How are you today?
Good. Welcome to the Artist Appeals. And you are over there at Design Edge, n'est-ce pas?
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I love the wall of toys behind you.
Yeah. It's sort of some of its greatest hits, some of it's things I just like, and a bunch of little knickknacks here and there.
Yeah, speaking of greatest hits, we always start with these rapid fire questions, but I made some new ones for you. What is the number one top selling toy you've helped develop? So that's number one.
Sure, that would be Tickle Me Elmo.
No way. You made Tickle Me Elmo?
We worked on Tickle Me Elmo, yes.
Now I'm disgusted. I don't know whether to be like, I mean, that thing was horrid as a parent, but as an entrepreneur, I'm impressed.
Yeah, we worked on quite a few big hits, but in that era, there was a lot of like huge hits because it was like TV still had it was still television before the internet, so companies would put a lot of money behind one item, and that item would just blow up and be a fad. I mean, so things like Tickle Me Elmo, we did Pogs, that was also gigantic.
Oh, I remember Pogs.
Yeah,
The things
yeah,
that went and jumped.
Yeah, Pogs was a nightmare for me for like a summer because it was hand cutting prototypes all the time, and they're chipboard. And I was using an X-Acto knife, and I don't know how old I am, 19 or something. And I would come home with it looked like I had arthritis knuckles, like all just all bound up from cutting chipboard with an X-Acto knife, all day long, every day. But
Oh my gosh, I remember those. Flashback. So, what is the number one thing you love to do in your business then?
um help entrepreneurs become toy companies. I mean, that's really become a big focus for me lately. It's like I've made all those inroads, and I have all the resources, and if I can get everyone's ducks in a row, there's a clear path to success, which is something I'm proud that I've been able to find a path to do that.
That's really cool. So, what's the one thing you hate doing in your business?
Sitting with my accountant.
I hear that over and over again. The bookkeeping is like killer for everybody. Oh man, I commiserate. So number three, what is the funniest or weirdest thing that has ever happened to you in designing a toy or in the toy business?
I mean, there's been so many like weird things. I mean, I've been yelled at by celebrities. That's always been a little surreal.
Who's the biggest celebrity that ever yelled at you, and what did they yell at you about?
Oh, I don't even know if I could say. I'd probably get like a cease and desist or a lawsuit from. But I had one celebrity who, without saying any names, we were working with another toy company to develop a line of like children's like play sets and dress up stuff with her, and she was really huge at the time. And the company couldn't get along with her because she was just butting heads and making outrageous demands all the time.
hmm
But then when we were in meetings, she always sort of leaned on me so they're like, all right, Matt, can you just deal with her direct? And I was like, sure, no problem. It doesn't seem to be that big of a deal. And we worked well together for about 2 weeks. And then one day she like loved the layout that we did, and like totally was like, this is fantastic. Thank you so much. Oh, I love you guys. You're the best. Next time you're in LA, come to my house. Da, da, da. It's like, all right, cool. And then she called me back 5 minutes later, like a completely different person, and told me, you can't do that. You can't go inside of people's heads and steal their thoughts. And I was like, whoa, okay,
Whoa.
she's not stable, or she's on something. Yeah, she was like, how did you know I liked red? Like, you must have gone in my head. And I giggled, and I was like, I don't know. Like, what are you talking about? And then she just like lost her mind and started screaming and then crying. And then her assistant got on the phone. And then long story short, I was like, I can't deal with this. And like, I don't know, they kept yelling at me. And then I was like, you know what? Go fuck yourself. Like, I'm not doing this. And I hung up the phone. And then I called the company. I'm like, I'm not doing that. And they were like, okay. And I thought I was going to get fired from the company. Instead, they're like, they couldn't deal with her either. So
Oh, sounds like she was having some delusions. If she thinks
yeah.
you're in her head because you know that she likes red. I mean, red's a popular color for marketing.
Yes, yes, that was. I remember that so clearly. I'm like, what? And I said it like that, like, and as soon as I said it with like a bit of a chuckle, she lost her. She just lost it like completely. Like thought I was mocking her, and it was bad.
Oh, poor thing. Okay, so what is the one most important piece of business advice you'd give your younger self if you were starting out again today?
I mean, just stay the course, and then and be serious about having fun.
Be serious about having fun. I'm going to quote you on that. I mean, you are in the toy industry, so is that a bad pun, an oxymoron, or is it just for real?
It's for real. I mean, that's the deal, right?
Yeah,
Professionally have fun.
yeah.
It's a good gig to have if you can have it.
Right, right. All right, we're going to talk in terms of, I normally use the acronym APPEALS: art, product, presentation, educate, amplify, licensing and contract terms, and success. But I've modified these specially for you today. So, what is the first step in developing a toy? Like for those people watching or listening, what is the very first thing if you want to get into toy design or invent a toy or something like that? What is the very first thing you should do?
Well, toy design and toy inventing are different animals, so that wouldn't be the same answer for both.
Okay.
If it's toy inventing, I mean, after obviously the idea, right? Because that would be the first, technical step. Research, see what's
Okay.
out.
So sketches are the idea and then research and making sure of whether it's viable.
Yeah, I mean, I would research even before I did the sketch. I mean, when I'm lying in bed at night and something comes across my mind, I'm like, yeah, that's gonna make me $1 million. Then I'll just go search the internet and be like, nope, it's not gonna make me $1 million. 20 other people did it.
Okay, so research even before kind of invention and sketching and
Yeah,
and
just think
concepting.
about what your idea is and try to figure out how many keywords can possibly mix and match to see if anyone else is out there.
Okay, cool, cool. How do you keep yourself young and in a playful mood for evaluating toys? Like, how do you evaluate these ideas?
I don't know how I keep myself. I mean, that's and if I gave that advice, there'd be doctors calling saying, like, don't do that.
I am not a lawyer. I am
Yeah.
not a doctor. They did
Um,
spend the night in a hotel. What was that ad campaign? That was
yes,
a weird
yeah.
one. That was really weird.
I don't know. It's just I wish I had a clear answer for that. It's really it's a cumulative thing that's built over time. Like just you've seen enough, you've learned enough, you've heard enough, you've seen enough mistakes, you've seen enough successes. You get a sense of what the market can bear. You get a sense of what the public wants, but you also have an idea of how it can be produced and how it can be produced for the right amount of dollars. I mean, the trick is to wear so many hats. Like you have to look at something and immediately think of it as a designer, think of it as an engineer, think of it from a marketing perspective, and think of it from a retail, and of course, most importantly, think of it as a consumer.
Mm, yeah, yeah. Okay. So I guess that plays off of that. How do you know if a toy is going to be popular?
You don't. Every year they make the summer blockbuster movie that bombs, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you can put a lot of money into something and a lot of effort and hire all the right people and it can still tank. It's not to dilute it, but it is a bit of a numbers game to some respect. Yes, can that be worked into your favor, or can you mitigate as much as possible to protect yourself? Yeah, but with all numbers games, and it's a bit of gambling. It's like playing the stock market. Are you buying conservative stocks, or are you going for the risky ones? It depends on your personality.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Good answer. So where do you find inspiration then? Where are you finding inspiration right now? What do you find
Oh, I find
inspirational?
inspiration everywhere. I'm like, my friends won't go to the supermarket with me because I'll like stay there for 2 hours, like walking around, just get super excited. Like, you see what Jello did with Crane? It's amazing. Like, that's
Did you see that? You looked at it. Oh my gosh. So just look around you and be
yeah. I mean,
inspired, huh?
especially in toys. I mean, essentially toys are miniature versions or dumbed down versions or hollowed out versions of everyday things. That everyone
Oh,
always jokes like, "Oh, give a kid a refrigerator and a box and he'll play with it." Yeah, of course he will. Then he'll also play with a miniature car, and he'll play with them. She'll play with them, and he'll play with a miniature stove, and anything's fun if done right.
hmm, good idea. Okay, okay. Let's talk product for just a minute. How do you price a toy?
How do you price a toy correctly?
Smart ass.
How do you price a toy? You have to know the market and the retail, and you work on something referred to as, for model, you would use Keystone, which is pretty much a 4-time markup. So if you're buying goods for $5, you want to wholesale it for 10, and they will put it up for 20.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how do you,
And go ahead.
in order to get to that 5, you need to figure out whatever it is it takes to get it there. And if it doesn't work, then you likely won't have a successful item. And oftentimes, it's not as simple as just, making a cheaper version or a more expensive version. You really have to put thought into it. And a lot of startups sometimes get very married to their original concept, which is more often than not overbuilt. And when you want to remove things, they go into panic mode because that's the only way they've ever known it. And
Right.
sometimes the dumbed down version is the better version. If you think about all those great songs that you've heard over your lifetime, and then, like in the 90s, MTV would do Unplugged, and the Unplugged versions sometimes are better than the real versions. So don't be scared to simplify.
I loved Unplugged. Yeah. So, I've heard of looking at other products where they on the market and, picking a price point similar to that. But I've also heard of, and then working backwards from that. But I've also heard some people say that, you have to kind of start with your BOM, which you mentioned the other day, the bill of
Yes, yeah,
materials, and work
materials.
upwards.
They're in, they're in, they go side by side. That's, I wouldn't know if, I mean, yeah, yes, you build your bill of materials to get a sense of where your costing actually is, but you have to
Mhm.
work cost reductions to what's out there, to what the retail is supposed to be. And that's what I'm saying. Sometimes you have to dumb things down. The boards, the box might be a thinner gauge, or you might, rotocast something opposed to injection molded, or, maybe you don't need a vacuum form tray in your game box. It's all those little things. Maybe the scale is just too off. Sometimes, actually, oftentimes, you're really just dealing with plastic by the pound.
Hmm.
So you really just, the wall section of your toy might be too thick. You might have hired somebody who, renders something really well in CAD, but doesn't understand the engineering of the internal parts of any piece of plastic, and they just spec everything to a certain part, and you hand that to a factory, and they look at it and they go, "Okay, that's what they want." They'll never come to you and tell you that you should thin it out, you know, and at least not initially, because that's all margin for them.
That's fascinating. So, just to recap, it sounds to me like you're saying you've got to work both from what the market currently has and work backwards and downwards. And you've got to work from the bottom up, seeing what your prices are. And then I love the straight up tips you just gave us on actually decreasing cost by decreasing thickness of cardboard or decreasing the thickness of plastic. That's fascinating.
Yeah, you have to add and subtract all at the same time.
So it's a calculus equation.
Yes, yes, yes. It's new math, right?
It's new math. Yeah, no doubt. Okay. So, how do you really balance those two, I guess, is the question that almost have to answer is
Well,
how
it's
do you
problem
balance those
solving.
two things?
It's just problem solving, and it's just something you just get better at over time. I think, costing your first couple of things. Most people, a lot of startups, I find, read a book or listen to one podcast or
Mm,
or, or whatever it is, and they've gotten some good advice, but they don't have the practice, but they think they figured it out. It's like they read a magazine on how to play piano, and now they think they can do a concerto, and it's like, it's going to take some time, and you're going to have to learn the tricks and the nuances, and there's always more to learn. And every factory is different, so you might have think you figured it out. Now you're trying another factory, you're trying different angles, and they're like, no, because their strength might be something different, and
Mm.
especially if you don't know processes, but you think you understand manufacturing. If your factory's primary business is injection molding, but you're handing them something that needs to be, die cast, don't expect them to have amazing pricing on it. Not every factory does everything. That's the one thing that I am shocked by, the amount of people who think that the one factory is doing everything. It's not. They have to outsource the tooling or the die making or the printing or certain components. Maybe they don't injection mold, but they rotocast, so they have to get the injection molded parts from someplace else, and it's all packed out at the end of the day. No one's truly making everything under one roof unless there's some mega factory.
Mhm.
In which case, if you're a startup, if you're using a mega factory, you're paying too much.
Right. So look at a lot of different manufacturers and get different quotes and make sure that your factory is specialized.
Yeah, or find a solid agent that has these relationships across the board, because it's every time when you're just going into these things, the odds that you're going to know enough people to get all these ducks in a row is pretty slim. And whether it's domestic or it's overseas manufacturing, there's so much to it.
Right.
There really is. That's why massive toy companies have entire departments to do this.
Well, I think we need to back up to the word agent right there because I think that's one of the secrets of the toy industry I hadn't realized is that there's agents that work between inventors and new startups to help you with this type of stuff. So, can you talk a little bit about how somebody finds an agent? What is that agent called? Is it a toy agent? Is it what? How's that work?
Well, in the sense that we're talking about right now, that there's manufacturing agents.
Okay.
Um, I mean, they're throughout the world. In the toy industry, a lot of them are based in Hong Kong,
Oh,
which is why I lived in Hong Kong for a while because we have offices in China, and I opened my first office in Hong Kong in 2004.
I
But
didn't know that. Do you speak Mandarin or what?
no, they no, they would well, first they would speak Cantonese
My
in
bad.
Hong
Oof.
Kong. Well, yeah, you can't offend people.
I
The Cantonese I found it's very difficult. It's pretty much a sung language, and you can say the same word 5 different ways, and it's all about intonation. And they would mean
oh
5 different things.
oh.
Yeah, completely
I would
different.
screw that up.
Yeah, well, I know. And also, Hong Kong was a British colony, so everyone speaks English.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
So, where were we? So, but
Oh,
I
agents. We're talking about
yes,
how does somebody go about finding a toy manufacturing agent to help them get costing for their idea or invention.
yeah. Well, obviously networking, different groups and societies. Obviously the Toy Association is a great resource. People Play is a great resource. Also, if you're an inventor and starting off, you can always reach out to the United Inventors Association. If you're in Europe, there's IFIA. There are connections to these sorts of things. But it's not like a lot of these people like heavily advertise. This isn't the sort of thing that Joe Blow consumer just opens the old school phone book and it goes down A and finds AAA agent and uses the first one on the list.
I
Um,
can't Google it.
you can, but there's also the problem with that is I find that the good ones are hard to find because
Hmm.
there are a lot of scammer organizations out there that will onboard you and just like run you through the ringer and charge you for anything and every little thing. As Design Edge as an agent, we work with companies not just to manufacture for them, we also get them to retail. My business model is their success is how we grow, because I have the connections. I know the sales reps. I know the buyers. We work with the retailers, and if I can get the product in the right hands, instead of making 5,000 pieces once and then saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry, these are stuck in your garage," I can be excited when they get placement into major retailers and hopefully grow and become a sizable company. And even we have the ability even to then, when companies become of a certain size, we can get them funding. We can get purchase orders financed. We can get interest from larger companies to give them additional seed money and or even purchase them.
That's fantastic. And it leads us right into this idea of presentation. So we're talking about production and a product, right? And you really are a full service company taking somebody from A to B. And then, you know, the next step of that is it's not just enough to produce it and like you said and have it sitting in your garage. The hard part is selling it, marketing it, getting it out there.
Yeah, it is. And in my early days, when I didn't, I guess I just didn't know any better. People would ask me to make stuff, and we would. Now I won't. It's you know it's very stressful in those days when a product's not working out, and to you know to sit there and be like, well, I didn't really, I didn't get it to begin with. That's a terrible answer. Like, I have to really feel there's something there.
Right.
Yeah, it's especially since my model now is clear, straight to, getting them established as a company and helping to build companies and not just, you know, build something for people.
Right, right. You're not a one-off. You want to help build a company. You don't want to help build just one toy. So let's talk about presentation because I think a really good part of building a good toy is the presentation. I've been learning more and more how critical packaging is and how critical presentation is of a toy and an invention, right? So,
Mhm.
what are some packaging best practices that you could share?
Well, there's a ton of those. My degree is actually in package design. So, and then and Design Edge
Okay,
was
well, we don't have all day, so just pick.
and Design Edge was birthed as a package design company. That's how my parents started the company back in 1987. So
Oh, really? So you focused on packaging originally?
we still do a ton of packaging,
Yeah.
and we nominated. We could last year we nominated for Taggy on package design. The year before that, Taggy and Toady for stuff that we did packaging on.
What are those two? Just so that we have them
So
defined.
it's like the Grammys and the Academy Awards of the toy industry.
So what does it stand for?
Toady is Toy of the Year, and Taggy is Toy and Game Inventor of the Year.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. But
So pick your top 5 or 10 packaging tips and tricks for us.
planogram, I'm just knowing the planogram, knowing what size things are supposed to be is a major thing. Making sure the value to scale is correct is another essential thing.
Wait, let's not go too far. So planogram is where you have a mock-up of what it's going to look like in the store and each of the units on the shelf or displayed, right? It's
Yeah,
like
it's
a
like a dummy
mock-up.
store, and
Mhm.
everything's very modular.
Okay.
So basically, to simplify it, because it gets a little more complicated than
Of
this,
course.
a retailer has their shelves laid out, and then they pick what's going to go into that shelf all in the planogram, and they really try to get things into a size to which if something's failing, they can pull something out and replace it without having to reorganize the entire shelf and or store.
Okay. And so the next one you talked about was value to scale. That's a new term. Um, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's not making your package too big or too small, really, and just making sure
For
that
the price?
the perceived value is there when you look at it.
Right. So if it's expensive, it needs to look big. And if it's not expensive, it needs to be smaller. Is that oversimplifying?
Um, yes and no. I mean, that would have been the correct answer, 10, 15 years ago. But obviously everyone's been trying really hard to lower the footprint of packaging for,
Oh,
for the
yeah.
environment.
Sustainability.
Yes, yes. So it also comes down to materials and types of printing and there's a lot of other factors. But
Right.
but if size is important, if you have a yes.
Can I quote you on that?
uh, but if you have a package on shelf that's 10 inches sitting next to a box is 20 inches and they're the same price and they're in the same category, consumers are generally going to buy the larger one.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So that was 2 and I interrupted you. Keep going. Any more? You want to do 3 more?
I mean, we could go forever on this. I don't think I would be able to stop. One biggest mistake I see is, not hiring the proper type of designer. So a lot of people get what I refer to as friends that draw, or somebody they know who does a website to do their packaging, or somebody who's, used to do magazine layout or does signs. They're not the same art. They're not the same discipline. Far too often when I can tell that one of those people do it because they'll do a beautiful box that's completely monochromatic, therefore camouflage. Right.
Right.
I see that very, very often. It's a pet peeve of mine, which is why I get very excited when I see the new green on Jello. Wow, it stands out.
I love green jello.
Also understanding, just the color palette at retail, and also where the trends are.
Mm.
That's one thing. If there's any bit of secret sauce to Design Edge, which I'm very fortunate that we work with such a large breadth of toy companies and novelty companies and gift companies that we're working with them in real time. So we see the trends as they are developing and are able to execute that across many platforms, opposed to usually somebody that's in-house has to wait to see stuff that comes out and then go like, oh, I saw this at retail, but like this, we be doing this. So we can be oftentimes we're a full year ahead, which is, exciting because I love to see, like, when we come out with something and then all of a sudden, the following year, everyone's followed suit on it.
Right, right. That's really cool. So, thinking of presentation and trends, if you have an idea and you want to get the basics in place, what are the essential things you need to have in place to present your new toy design, either at a conference or to the market? Like, what are just some of the basics that you need to look towards having in place?
Well, there are different benchmarks depending on what phase you're looking to present it at. So like a conference or like a trade show, depends on the trade show. So certain trade shows are presenting to, so like in 2-3 weeks, you have the Los Angeles Toy Show, and then immediately after is the Dallas Fall Preview. Both of them are preview shows. So we can get away with dummied prototypes, things that look either, look great but don't really function, or have a perfect function and like an amazing rendering to show how it's going to come, and some preliminary packaging that gets the point across, but is identified as not being final, but just there to get a reading from retail.
Interesting. So there's actually conferences that are preview conferences.
Yes, but those are closed door.
Mm-hmm.
They're invite only. So but that's where ultimately if you're starting a toy company, I mean, that you want to work your way up to the phase where it makes sense to be attending those, but you just can't show up at that. Like if you think of like Astra, the American Specialty Toy Retail Association, you can sign up to Astra and get a booth and sit down and potentially get orders just by sitting there, as long as but that's not going to happen at the preview shows, because it's reps and buyers have appointments. It's appointment only.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know Astra has a new vendor section, or a newbie section, if you will. So that's where you and I met.
Yeah, that's it's a great section, and I love that Astra gets behind that, because that's specialty toy is the perfect place for any startup company to launch. If you can win the hearts of the specialty, the mom and pops throughout the US, you can make a great living for the rest of your life without ever once selling to a Target or a Walmart.
So let's define specialty toy market.
Sure. Well, specialty is the mom and pops, the small retail chains, the independent shops sprinkled all over the nation. I'm sure every town's got their local toy guy who's maybe been there forever, or maybe it's some new pop-up but very trendy place in Brooklyn. But again, it's only 500 square feet, but it's curated amazingly. A lot of specialty are very good at curating, an in-store experience. Like, they're also going to talk to their consumer. The consumer's going to walk in the door. They're going to ask them how they're doing today, and I guess they do that at Walmart too, but that's not quite what I mean.
No, and they can't help you find anything either. I
Right.
know
And
one
they'll
of the
demo stuff too, and they'll show you stuff. That's a really big part of what's so great about specialties. I guess specialty does special things.
They do. I know there's one in our region, the learning source that I have my stuff in, and they specialize in educational toys.
Mhm.
And they also cater to the teacher market and the homeschool market. So they have teacher supplies for the classroom, as well as homeschool curriculum type of things.
Mhm.
So it's a really great experience. And these things are, these specialty toy stores are becoming more and more rare. So when you do find them, they're just so much fun.
Oh yeah, they're great. They really are. Well, mass, because you wanted the both versions, is your targets and your Walmarts of the world. It's they're dealing with a much broader appeal, but I would also say that they're selling, I guess the comparison, they're selling pop music. You know, these are toys that you're going to see everywhere for 6 months, for a year, and then you're
Mhm.
likely not going to see them again. You know,
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
exception of the classic staples, but even those staples get rebranded and rebranded and rebranded. Like last year, for instance, we for Walmart we redid Monopoly to be Spider-Man in this Spider-Man Monopoly. So
Spider-Man and the Multiverse,
yes,
Monopoly.
that's exactly what we did, and it's a Walmart exclusive. So
Oh, I didn't know. I'm gonna have to go look for that one. My kids love the multiverse.
we had a lot of fun with that one. It's quite a it was quite an exciting piece to work on because it was one of the first times actually where we were told to do all the illustrations ourselves, and we weren't supplied by Marvel, which I was like,
Oh,
yeah.
oh, that's interesting. So very good. Okay, so we've got conferences. And we've got specialty stores, and then we talked a little bit about agents, but what about sales reps and sales groups? Those are very interesting new job titles that I've discovered along my adventure in inventing iConnect Crafts. What can you tell us a little bit about sales reps and sales groups and approaching them? What are they? How do you approach them?
Well, they are the liaison between the manufacturer, which would be you in the case, and the retailer. So they are the gatekeeper. They are going to their job is to curate a lot of products to get in front of the buyer for the buyer then to make decisions. Sales reps and agents and whatever we want to call them, they are essential to the toy industry, and they are not always the easiest to get in front of, especially if you're a startup. Many of them will tell you that they want to see you in 300 stores on your own before they'll even talk to you.
Mm.
There's a lot of headaches for them, which I understand that go along with new cos. New companies generally don't always have their pricing in order, or they made mistakes like we just said. Their planogram sizing was off, or and it just they're they're not in it to mentor you. They're there to find a product that they know is going to sell. Which, back to what I was saying before, is part of the what we do is we make sure from day one that everything's set up so that when I bring in reps, there's all that's taken care of. They don't have to worry about that.
All right. Educate. E for educate. E for educate. What are some of the key measurements? Like in marketing, we use the term KPIs, key performance indicators. But how do you look at what are some of the key performance indicators that you see that make something potentially successful?
Well, as we go through each phase, if everything's starting to fall into place, I mean that's really your indicator.
Okay.
If the design comes out strong, is always a great thing. The packaging is where it's supposed to be, and by that I don't just mean that the person who's come up with the toy or paying the bills thinks it looks great. That it actually does and executes and gets the message across very clearly on shelf. And then the sales reps, so I can get them on board. That's a great indicator because you know they'll have no problem telling me behind closed doors that it's shit, or they're not interested, or like maybe Matt, come back to me when you got something, because we bust each other's chops too. We're on friendly levels. So I mean those are your biggest indicators. But and if they can get it to the next stage to the buyer, and the buyer's giving it time, and the buyer wants you to send in samples, obviously that's your next big indicator. So it's a process, and I think that process exists to sort of best mitigate success at retail.
Right.
That's the risk you run a little bit with just making something and throwing it up on Amazon, because you've removed all those steps, and you've arbitrarily done your design and your engineering and your manufacturing, and stand a chance of failing horribly.
Right. Speaking of mistakes and failing, let's talk about hazard warnings and testing, because I think this is something that, when I was first designing my stuff, I was like, oh, what are those? Hazard warnings? Choke hazard warnings? Oops, you mean I need those? So you have some experience there. What can you tell us about testing toys and testing requirements? And how do you go about that? Because that's another component, right?
Sure. Well, the toy industry is heavily regulated. What's the word?
Regulated.
Regulated.
I like your word better though. Regulated.
That's my New York accent was coming out. Yo, it's regulated.
Regulate yourself, yo.
Yeah. So there are, we have to meet safety requirements on all levels. So that's things have to go through a choking tube, and lanyards can only be of a certain length, and there's only certain materials that are permitted, and if there's ability to choke, we need choking warnings on items. If there's if something's flammable, we need to be able to indicate that it's flammable. There's so many different regulations that it's important to be paid attention to. Now, how does that happen? Well, it's very tricky, because the U.S. is a sovereign nation, which means that every state has its own set of rules.
Oh,
right?
really? So every state has its own hazard warning requirements,
Not
testing
necessarily,
requirements?
but they're you basically test to the highest requirement for all.
Okay. Is that California?
For the most part. Oregon's a very close second. Portland
Oh,
loves
really?
it. Right. That's because most Californians are moving to Oregon, right?
Didn't know the mass
Well,
migration.
yeah, a lot of people live in California. I love California though.
I went to grad school there. Beautiful state. I
Yeah,
particularly like the northern part, personally.
yeah. Oh yeah, Northern California is fantastic, and I like Southern California as well. I'll be there in 2 weeks for a whole week.
Nice.
Where was I going? So yes, we employ third-party testing labs that are like behemoth companies that will test the products, and A, make sure that they are compliant, and B, make sure that all our warnings are compliant.
Great. Yeah, that was something I ran into at Astra that I hadn't seen before, as I was approached by several testing people. Individuals came and said, hey, has this been tested? Do you need me? So there's individuals too, right?
Well, I'd imagine those individuals are just working for a much larger company. I don't believe there are individual testing labs. I don't think the Arts and Targets of the world would accept their certifications. There's giant testing lab companies, like we employ a company like SGS is a great example. I mean, they're worldwide. You're going to want your testing company to be about as legit as it possibly as it comes.
That's good advice. I mean, that's good advice. I literally was approached by some individuals that had smaller companies, I do believe. So going with a bigger company is great advice.
Right, and those smaller companies might be good for you. It depends on what you need it for. So let me rephrase that, because I don't want to be shitting on anyone's testing company, right? And they can test your product, and they might be able to tell you if you're not compliant, which is important.
Yeah.
Right. So that there is a good service there. But if we're going to ship to Walmart or Barnes and Noble or Target or any major retailer, I'm going to want to make sure that we're using a testing lab that is, very difficult to argue, about the
right.
Your insurance
about their validity.
Your insurance company is going to make sure that you're using, a very reputable testing company. And oftentimes, actually, pretty much all the time, retailers are going to tell you that you have these specific testing labs. It's not really up to you.
Oh, okay. Very cool. So, what organizations are essential to be a part of if you want to start a toy business and start getting out there? What are the first ones, the best ones that you would recommend to somebody just starting up?
I mean, just starting up. I mean, the two primary ones are, the Toy Association, which I sit on the board there. I sit on the Creative Factor, which is the education section of it. So we try to educate inventors and startups, which I guess is
Yeah.
what I'm doing right now, and as
Uh-huh.
well as People of Play, formerly known as ShyTech, which I also sit on their advisory board, which is a fantastic event that happens every November, to which companies, startups get mentored by all executives from all walks of the toy industry.
Oh, fantastic. Where's that going to be?
Chicago.
Chicago. I want to go.
Yeah, I mean it's Chicago in November. Bring your shorts and just come and chill out.
Very cool. Chicago's a beautiful town.
Love Chicago. This will
Yeah.
be I can always figure out what year, how many years I've been going to Chi-Tech, because the first one I ever went to, I took my son, who was at that time like 2.5 months old, and,
Oh,
and he will be 15 in 2 weeks.
oh, congratulations.
So that's 15 years of going to Chi-Tech, and a cool 15-year-old son.
And now people of play.
Yes, now we rebranded it a couple of years ago. So I did their original logo, which is the Chi-Tech logo, and then I redid their logo to be People of Play. And there's a great study in branding. So I had done the original logo, and then the people in charge wanted to try somebody else to do some new logos, and they did, and they weren't bad logos. But then I came
Hmm.
back and I told them, I'm like, I think you're making a big mistake, because you're changing your name, which is difficult as is,
Hmm.
and you're changing your branding at the same time, which without a massive budget, you're going to get everyone confused. So I convinced them to use the same aesthetic with the new name, and it completely worked. It was a pretty seamless transition. So
Fantastic.
I've got a
I
lot of
like
kudos on that, because and it was and yeah, and I'm happy that we stuck to that.
kudos to you. I like the name People of Play. I think it's more indicative of what it is you do, particularly for somebody that's just coming in from the outside world and wondering, what do you do?
Yeah, it's a great name. It took the board a long time to get to it, and I'm glad they didn't. And plus the abbreviation, POP, People of Play. It's fun.
It's Poppy.
Yes, it pops.
It pops. So, getting bigger, amplifying. How do you sell more in the toy industry? What is the best route you would advise for people looking to scale their toy business?
Stay within the same category, and innovate within that area, and become established as a vendor that will fill certain slots for certain retailers. So if you're a craft company, don't make your next item a game.
Mm.
Your relationship with the buyer is what's going to grow your company. So when the sales reps walk in with your line, and they see, and they're able to walk in, they're going to meet with buyers that are in very specific categories. So it's not a toy buyer, it's the game buyer, it's the craft and activities buyer, it's the stationary buyer, it's the, et cetera, et cetera. Each one of those categories has its own buyer. And if you just walk in with one item and the buyer goes, not for me, well, you're dead right there. If you walk in with 5 items, the buyer is going to give you more consideration, and might pick just one, but they might pick all of them.
Hmm.
But that being said, the buyer is going to get to know you, and they're going to come to rely on you, and they're going to help and as your items are successful and they know that you've got more behind it, they're going to make sure to make space for you.
Right? How do you get connected with buyers?
It's it's all the things we're talking about. You've got to do all those
Yeah.
steps right and get in front of them. You're not going to get a relationship with a buyer, 3 days after you come up with your idea.
Right.
It's going to take you, 12 to 18 months to even get in front of a buyer. And you're going to have one meeting with that buyer and probably 5 years before 4 years before you can really establish a relationship to which the buyer is going to even want to, make you consider you rather as a vendor that's reliable and consistent.
Going back to the whole staying within your category and having a product line, how many products should a company have, or should there be within a category?
Well, they should be within a category, but they should not be variations of the same thing. So that's just a couple of SKUs of the same item. That's not quite the same as having multiple lines. So you eventually going to want to work your way up to have 2 or 3 lines, because it's very difficult to be a one item company. The reps don't really want to carry you because the retailers don't want to do all the paperwork and fill you out as a vendor, have that one item fail, and now they're right back to the drawing board, have to fill that space again. They're looking for companies that can have great success, and if there's a bomb or a failure, can absorb it and maybe replug that hole. And great. If you look at the Walmarts of the world, they won't take single item companies, because if it fails, they're putting you out of business.
That's really interesting. It's a different perspective on
Mm-hmm.
Walmart. So, going back for just a second to packaging and putting things on the shelf and having space, is it important for a toy company to create a point of purchase display, to have a unit that maybe your line of products comes in? Do you know what I'm
Absolutely.
saying?
Especially at specialty, a point of purchase display could make or break your item, because it's marketing. It's there. There's an entire assortment can come into there. They don't have to buy multiple case packs. They can get 5 or 6 versions of something into one PDQ, and that's that.
PDQ?
Pretty darn quick.
I've heard this in even other genres. One of the designers of a greeting card company that I spoke with, I thought it was fascinating that she sells the spinners preloaded with her designs. And that's how they do it. You buy the whole spinner with the whole line of cards, and they have a fuller size one or they have a table size one. But
Mm-hmm.
that's what you get. You get a spinner preloaded with her designs of her cards. And so it's real easy for the store to just plunk. There you go.
Absolutely. It's a great way to open doors. But to the point before, you're going to have multiple SKUs. You can't have a display filled with 24 of the same exact item.
Right. Let's talk SKU for just a second, because that's a term that maybe somebody who's really new wouldn't be familiar with. It's SKU. What's it stand for?
Stock keeping unit.
Stock keeping unit. Thank you.
So your stock keeping unit. So if you have a line, each item gets a different SKU number. But if it's 10 of the same thing, or let's say it's I have an orange Sharpie in my hand right now for those who are listening on audio, but then this might have a different SKU number than the black Sharpie, even though they're both Sharpies and they're both markers. But they need to be able to track how many orange they sold versus how many blacks they sold.
Right. So it's a way to identify the product.
Mm-hmm.
Another one that I think is interesting that you need to know is UPC codes.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk about that for a sec?
Well, the barcode, the UPC code is the digital system to which the computer scans and reads it. They're all unique identifiers. So yes, you absolutely need one. And I would advise always generate a new one. We've had nightmares in the past where people bought used ones, and then you're scanning your baby doll, and it comes up as an adult diaper.
Well, it's interesting. I did see that online is there are a lot of third-party companies that will try and sell you SKUs, which is not a good thing. You need to go direct to the source. So
Yeah.
what's the source for UPC codes?
There are plenty of UPC generating companies, and there are apps that will do it as well.
I,
There
bel
are quite a few options when it comes to that. Yeah.
I believe it's GS1 is the primary, is it not?
Yes.
GS1
Yes.
dot
That
dot org?
that's what we use. Yeah. But fortunately for me, I have somebody here who does that. So I don't spend much of my time generating UPCs at this point.
Right, of course not. But I think it's important to know because some places won't take you without a UPC code, right?
I think it's essential at this point in time. It's essential. The world is digital. That's
Yeah.
just the way that it is. No one's, you know, no one's just looking at the price tag in the corner and punching it into their register anymore. It's everything's scanned.
I've made that mistake. I didn't know about UPC codes when I first started out. So I've made that mistake, been there, done that. And you want to incorporate that into your packaging design because if you have to add it afterwards as a sticker, it sucks. Trust
Yes,
me.
that can become quite costly and annoying. Yes.
Really annoying. Licensing and contract terms coming, but let's hit on rep groups real quick because this is
Mhm.
another facet of the industry that I didn't know about. And when I learned about rep groups, I was like, oh, what are these? And what are these magazines like the Good Toy Company? So, what are these collectives? I guess they're two different things. Rep groups and collectives are
They are different
different.
things. So there are literally thousands of sales reps across the nation, and they have, some are part of giant organizations, and some are part of small, and some are part of conglomerates. And each one of these represents a territory, and each one of them has its own group of retailers to which it represents. So you can get a rep group that only does Walmart, but you can also get a rep group that does all of New England.
Mhm.
And they are the ones, back to what we were saying before, sort of the gatekeepers to the retailers. So yes, reps are extremely important, and finding the right rep or rep groups or sales manager to manage your reps is essential to being able to open up the doors to retail and have success.
Right.
Now you
And
also have buying groups, like
right.
the good toy group, the good games group. Jeez, I forget.
It's the Good Toy Group, I believe.
Good toy group, where it's more of it's a communal buy, to which they'll sort of curate between themselves. These are the buyers, not the reps. Will get together and say, we walked Astra and we all agree that these 10 items are what we all want in our stores. And then they'll use that power to negotiate purchasing with those guys, whatever retailers are. I
It's
mean, whatever.
fascinating. I'd never heard of it before. It reminds me a little bit of Pennsylvania's liquor laws.
Yeah.
Sorry, maybe that's an inside joke.
No,
But
no, I still laugh because it's liquor laws. I'm like, and when I think liquor laws, I'm like, oh, does that mean I'm getting arrested?
well, Pennsylvania, you can't buy liquor in a beer store. They are separate. The liquor stores are state controlled. So they purchase liquor from wine and liquor from the wineries or from the distilleries in bulk, and then they distribute them to the liquor stores in Pennsylvania.
Wow. Okay.
So it's a little similar to the toy groups in that, it's a group of stores, right? This group of buyers, and they almost make like a catalog, right?
Yeah, they do. That's pretty much that's pretty true. They're us, and then, like I said, people pick through and they use it as a buying power situation.
Interesting. Very interesting. All right, let's talk licensing and contract terms
Okay.
because I think this scares people so much. It's legalese and it just looks like gibberish sometimes. So, what are some of the most important terms or contracts that you need to have in place? Contracts or the terms within the contracts?
Do you mean the terms of a contract, or term like word terms that are in a contract? Because there are terms is a term in
Well, let's start with what
contract.
are some of the standard contracts you see within the toy industry?
Well, if we're talking about licensing, so if you're an inventor, right, and you want to license your product to a toy company, the standard royalty rate is 5%. Usually, an advance is generated based on what a company would predict to be their first year's order, about 20% of that order, and a minimum guarantees can vary, depends on the type of depends on the type of company that you were licensing to. There's so much to go through. There's a lot to be said about the size of the company to which you license an invention to.
Right.
It's people also have to calculate, is it worth it? Far too often I find people like, oh, I licensed a game, I'm super excited. I'm like, you licensed a game to a company that's going to make 5,000 pieces and you have 5% of net gross. What are you going to do with your $600? It's like, it's not really worth it. You might have been better off just doing it yourself. But licensing does become a big deal when you're dealing with the Spin Masters, Mattels, and Hasbro's of the world, where they're multi-billion-dollar corporations who are going to get placement in the largest retailers all over the planet. And you potentially are going to make a few $100,000 and maybe even $1 million if the product does.
Wow. So licensing is where you allow somebody else to produce, manufacture, and distribute your idea or your design, right?
Right. That's probably where I should have started.
You're welcome. I used to be a teacher. What can I say? I excel at summarizing things into simplifying things. That was my job for years, is to simplify it to get it there.
Yes, but you're 100% correct. So an inventor comes up with an idea, they don't have the wherewithal, or nor do they want to manufacture. Maybe they just want this as ancillary income, and they're just like, I'd like to sell this to somebody else to do. They would then approach a toy company or an agent and have them show the item around, and if they strike a deal to which they would make a royalty.
Yeah, fantastic. And you mentioned a couple that I've heard before, a minimum royalty guarantee, which is, a minimum amount of money that they're promising you they're going to make for you, right?
Yes.
And then royalties, what everybody wants to know, which is the, percentage of what you're going to get of the sale price, right? Other things that are really important to know or look at in a contract.
Well, yes, pay attention to the definition of net gross within your contract and make sure it's sort of buttoned up and makes sense and is clear. Because if it's left very vague, then someone can put grandma on the books for $5 million a year, and there goes all your profit.
So can you define net gross for us?
Well, net gross is the amount of profit minus the whatever
expenses,
discounts, and allowances, and whatnot. So you have to define, what's a permittable discount or allowance, or up to what percentage of the total will you allow that to be.
Okay, good advice. Really good advice. So that's normally in the contract, and you have got to define it. And if it's not there, you want to, right?
Yes. It's any contract I supply definitely has it. I don't know. It's not always. A shady company might not have that in there at all, because it allows them to be a little more, let's say, liberal with the accounting.
Yeah, they make more profit. They can keep more to themselves that way.
Mm-hmm.
So fantastic advice. Thank you. Have you ever been taken advantage of or messed up a contract? Is there any, learn from my experience moment you'd love to share? I've got plenty of.
I've had some instances where I was perturbed.
Any you want to share? Anything to look at? Any lessons learned?
Yeah. Pay attention to what they're making and look at your royalty reports, because they might not always correlate. Like, there was an item I had years ago with a very big toy company that they had purchased. They had bought the company I had originally licensed it to. And that ran for like 15 years. But they were saying about 8 years in, the royalty checks started coming in, and they became like ridiculously low, $300, $400. I was like, I was making, thousands and thousands previously. And I was like, okay, well, I guess the life cycle's over because that happens.
Okay. The life cycle of a toy.
Yeah, because toys are fashion, so they'll be very popular for a little while, and then they sort of die out, and then they sort of dissipate, and maybe you'd be
Okay.
lucky to bring it back 10 years later. Some fashions do come back, just like some toys do come back.
Every 20 years, my grandma would say.
Yeah, which
Keep your clothes for 20 years, they'll come back in style.
and there's certainly truth to that, especially in toys. But then I had gone over to Nuremberg, Germany for the European toy show, and I walk into the hall and I just see a giant version of my toy, like over a booth. Then I walk down to the booth and there's like, I don't know, 40, 50 different versions of the item. And I'm like, okay,
What?
this doesn't make sense. So I kind of got a little pissy and I made some phone calls with, a lot of like, WTFs to the, product managers and people I knew there. So I had to go in and audit. And then it ended up being that they were just paying me on one SKU, one color of one SKU instead of the entire line. So I had to,
Wow. Now,
yes,
this was a license that transferred from another company. So you had licensed the work to a company, and then that company that got bought by a
yes,
bigger company, and the license actually transferred.
yes.
And is that something that has to be negotiated up front in the original contract, or is that something that gets negotiated during the purchase of the company?
Well, no, it's usually if they're getting purchased, it's going to go with it, assuming that all the points of the contract are still met.
Okay. Okay.
Well, a big mistake
Interesting.
I find is a lot of inventors try to do this, BS to which they, the terms are 3 years and then it's renegotiable. Like, why would anyone sign an agreement where it can be renegotiated in 3 years, especially a toy company that's about to put, you know, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars into advertising, blow something up, and then give the inventor a chance to renegotiate at the height of his success. You name one inventor that's going to be like, hey, it's fine, pay me less. They're always going to be like, it's a big success, I want a bigger chunk.
Right.
So I've seen a lot of deals get killed like that, or inventors who just ask for too much, or also don't realize that negotiating, isn't it? Doesn't have to be guns drawn. A lot of these people feel like, I'm going to go in there and they're going to, play like a mean game of poker and they're going to, going to beat some people over the head. I found just, being friendly and just talking it through works just as well. In fact, better. I've had deals killed because the inventor just kept, sometimes because I also, I represent inventors here and there. I've had deals killed because the inventor just keeps pushing me and saying, well, nope, just try it. Let's see what happens. And I'm always like, you can't pull that card over and over again because they're going to walk away. And every
Right.
inventor thinks that they've got gold and that they're out of the change of the world. But there's always something behind it. And any company is going to be like, you know what? You're just too difficult. I'm going to move on. And then they always act shocked when the item gets dropped. Like they can't
Mm,
believe but they were playing a game. And these guys,
right.
it's not going to, who wants that?
Right. So don't play games. And it's interesting that you said there's not normally a term um, of years in licensing contract for toys. It's
Well,
more,
there are terms, but those terms there's benchmarks to those terms. And if the terms are generally hit, things renew.
oh, I
What
see.
some inventors want to do though is just have a flat out 3-year term and then have the ability to renegotiate at that 3-year point. And
Okay.
that never works. No,
So it's
no.
more standard to have 3 years with option to renew, and then the contract just is the same.
Yes, yes.
I see. Very good. Very good. All right. And finally, S for success. All right. Oh, yeah. Oh, this is a good one. I want to know this. Profit margins. That was a term that is a business term that I don't think a lot of people, unless they've gone to business school, maybe or are in the trenches, maybe understand. So, how do you calculate profit margins? And, can you tell us a little bit about that? Can you define it and tell us how you calculate it?
Sure. Well, the profit margin is, your actual profit, which you walk away, your net at the end of the day, right? That's
Hmm.
the check that you cash and you can go buy some groceries with, right? So What is that? So let's use that formula we used before when I was talking about Keystone. So which, you buy something for that, you buy it from the factory for 5, you wholesale it at 10, and the retailer puts it out at 20. So your margin is the $5 between the 5 and 10. But you have expenses, you have shipping, you have your design, you have whatever other ancillaries we can imagine, right? The sort of things that would have to be defined in that contract, to which we say, what is net gross? These are
Right.
the things that are in there. And in general, if you're walking away with a 30% margin out of that, you're doing well.
Excellent. 30% is a good margin. Okay. Um, how has the toy market evolved? And where do you think it's going in the future?
I love where the toy market's gone in my lifetime, because when I was a kid, um, you'd read about or see on TV in Japan, adults collecting toys and reading comic books, and Americans would be like, they're so weird. Fast forward to now, adults are reading comic books and collecting toys, and then Marvel movies are the biggest thing, and then on in cinema. Um, Toys have expanded to be respectable beyond the boundaries of just being a child.
Yeah.
If you look at the growth of the game market alone, and the craft and activity markets, to which it keeps expanding, and that's the value of play, and it shouldn't stop when you turn 13. If you can always expand your mind by always using your imagination, and toys allow that.
Yeah. You have a really good valid point. It's, when I was growing up, adults that played with toys were weird. And now I know lots of people that collect toys. I collect Legos and, other kind of fun stuff. And there's a whole, lines for adults.
Yeah,
Adult coloring books, adult Legos. I've got the new bonsai one.
right.
They've got a whole floral line of Legos. I'm like, yes,
Well, look at
Lego
the success of
flowers.
Funko. Funko isn't just sold to kids. Those Funko action figures are, they're probably selling from 40 to 80-year-olds. They're a
It's
lot of
true.
fun. They're
Yeah.
collectible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, very good. Well, thank you so much. This has been a hellishly informative podcast.
Well, thank you for having me on, and I'm sure I know I didn't touch on everything, but I hope it's enough for people to absorb. And if they have any questions, they can always reach out.
Yeah, where can people get hold of you? Where can people with an idea hit you up?
Sure. Well, a lot of people look for me on LinkedIn. I seem to just get a lot of traction on there for whatever reason. I joke with my friends that it's not the coolest social media platform to be on. I'd rather be a TikTok or an Instagram star, but that didn't work out. I'm not good looking enough.
Oh,
So
can you
I have a
dance?
I have a face for LinkedIn, right?
Can you dance? Wait,
Uh,
aren't you on a TV show?
I am on it. Yes, I just finished filming a TV show. Yes, that is correct.
And what's it called?
That TV show is called Make 48. It's on PBS. This will be the 5th season, although I'm only in season 5. But I will be on every episode, and with the last several episodes focusing particularly on Design Edge and what we do.
Very cool. So your company's Design Edge, and they can look you up at designedge.com.
Oh, we're designedge.net.
Oh,
That happened
dot
before
net.
my tenure. Yeah, that was still in college when my parents got that domain, but it hasn't seemed to be a problem. If you type Design Edge into Google, we're going to come up first. But yeah, you can find me at designedge.net, or you can email me at matt@designedge.net, or find me on LinkedIn. We also, if you're close enough, smoke signals work for us. It's
Shoot
fine.
up a flare.
Yeah, flare gun. Yes, yes. Either I'll get to you or the Coast Guard. It's one or the other.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Matt. Thank you so much for being on the Artist Appeals. This, as I said, has been really, really informative and a unique one. Toy design.